Hey guys, Dozr here bringing you a new video. With the first ever Flesh and Blood Pro Tour having just concluded, I wanted to make a quick video to talk about not only my experience with the Pro Tour, but also to announce the winners of the last video's giveaway, the 1,000 subscriber giveaway, so please stick around for the end to see if you won. Beyond that, I wanted to go over my deck list, my experience at the tournament overall, and to give you all a glimpse into what it was like to be there at that event, the historic one that it was. So right off the bat, we had to get there Thursday midday so we could check into our hotel and make sure that we were able to get there for the banquet that was going to be there on Thursday. They were having food served all around and had a couple drinks here and there, and it was all the Pro Tour people that were there. You know, I got to see a whole bunch of content creators, I got to see a whole bunch of well-known players as well, and personalities from all over the Flesh and Blood sphere, and got to have a really good time just hanging out and getting to meet people in person who I had only ever talked to over the internet with, such as on platforms like Discord. Finally, we got to meet James White a little bit before the Q&A section. He was just kind of over by our table and talking with some people. They wanted me to take their picture for them, just getting the first person they could find. And then I ended up talking to James for a little bit. He recognized the channel. Hi to everybody from LSS if you're watching. It was really great talking with him and getting to have that connection of, yeah, I do Flesh and Blood content, yeah, I play the game, but to know that, you know, not only does my channel reach the community, but it also reaches the people that have made the game was a really huge honor and privilege for me, and I was really glad to be able to have that time to meet with James and the rest of the people there. So that was fantastic. Then there was the Q&A that was filmed and I guess recorded for people to watch at home. And James was interviewed by Flake and got to answer a whole bunch of questions about the new set coming out and a bunch of other things. And that was fun to be a part of too. Everyone was trying to think about what they wanted to ask, and it was kind of a hodgepodge, kind of fun situation because they had opened up the banquet hall at that point to people that were not Pro Tour invites. So you had people that were just there for the event that got to take part in it and be there around everybody as well. Beyond that, the next day was going to come around soon, but before that, we all were crashing at the nearby hotel, and we were able to play a whole bunch of Flesh and Blood in the lobby and get a lot of good reps in the night before, kind of having that crisis moment of, oh, do I need to change my list at all before I get into the tournament? And I almost had a change of heart to go to a very defensive Prism list with Sink Belows, with Sigil of Solace, with a whole bunch of block cards so I could try and fatigue chains while still doing the full aura plan into Starvo. But I got my butt handed to me by a couple of chains, and I was like, well, I don't want to risk my entire situation here on a defensive strategy that can just be played around if they get the time snaps or whatever at the right time. So I decided to lock in my more mid-rangey strategy that night and show up to the Pro Tour on day one on Friday at 9 a.m. in the morning. Right off the bat, got paired up against a Starvo. I was running the list that you're going to see here in a moment, and I got my first triple Oaken situation of the entire weekend. It was 3 Okens and 15 cards. It was quite something, and it was not fun to have to deal with that. I really didn't have a chance at coming back in that game, especially on a light aura game plan as I had it. So that first loss was, fine. When I was at Vegas, I lost my first round, then I ended up going 6-1 that first day. So I was like, okay, gotta keep the good mental, gotta, just do your best and get through the rest of the day. Game 2, also paired up against the Starvo. Again, the first one was on Casino, second one was also on Casino, Captain Planet, Hyperfuse, whatever you want to call it, and I got beaten again. It was a bit closer that time. The guy had a couple more sideboarding options, like lead the charges for Prism as well. So it was a bit closer because I wasn't running so many of the auras, but I still just could not outvalue the Starvo and eventually just had my brains bashed in by the Dominating Hammer combo. And at that point, I'm 0-2 in day one, and that's not, unbeatable, or that's not, unsalvageable. The chain that ended up winning the entire event also started out 0-2, but my third round, I was placed against a Starvo yet again on Casino, and the deck knowingly had cards taken out of it for the Starvo matchup. I thought there'd be a lot fewer Starvos. I thought there'd be a lot more Prisms, a lot more chains, and a lot more of like an open meta. So I picked incorrectly, and the Starvos ended up taking advantage of my lack of the Parables and the Odes and the Prismatic Shields, and were able to constantly pressure my face and close out the games for the wins. So at 0-3, I was feeling pretty down. I was like, I needed 4 wins of my 7 games to make it to day 2, which meant that after 3 consecutive losses, I had to win every single game of day 1 to even make it into day 2. So that's what we had to do. And so we set out, and that's exactly what we did. We started with a matchup against a Briar, ended up deciding in the aggro package for that one, running the Briar over, and ripping some important cards with things like pummels and such on pivotal turns to get through and win the game. Then I played against I believe my 5th matchup that day was against a Chain or a Prism. Either way, the matchup for that is to take the auras out and put the red cards in and attack face. We were able to beat the Chain. It was a close matchup, but it was the deck did exactly what it was supposed to do, was able to put out a lot of damage, line up fractals with a lot of value off things like Red Enigma Chimera, and really be able to put the game away before the Chain had a chance to really ramp up and get you to that low HP threshold where Rosetta and Arcane chip damage really can close out the game. After that, the Prism matchup, I can happily say, only took 5 minutes. I'll talk a little bit more about the matchups a little bit later, but it was quite the blowout, and that's why we run cards like Fractal Replication. And then after that, my last matchup was a Oldheim for day 1, or maybe it wasn't my last one, but it was in there, and Oldheim was definitely a pretty much a gimme for Prism, even with the list with few auras like this one. There's still plenty in there to be able to. I think I'm running 18, so there's plenty in there to kind of outvalue the Oldheim and eventually close out the game. So made it into day 2, record of 4-3, and with a couple bruises, but we got there in the end. We got that foot over the finish line, at least into the next leg of the race. That night, ate some food, chilled out a little bit, got some reps in just to have some fun, and went into day 2 with an open mind and with the satisfaction of knowing that I made it to day 2 at the very least. Day 2 came around. Matchups were Starvo, which was a Casino Starvo, lost to that. Same thing as always, you put the auras down, you throw the attacks out, but if you can't snowball the game, then the Starvo will eventually just start sending everything at your face. You cannot block dominate every single turn, and you'll eventually just die. That's basically how that went, and went on to the next round. It was against another Starvo, except this time they were not on the Casino. This time it was on a more control Starvo build, which meant we finally had a chance to win, because the only way that I've been losing these games is from all of the dominate, from all of the fusing, the Oakenolds, the Crippling Crushes, you name it. So this guy and I had a very nice game. We played out, it took a while. It took like 50 minutes for us to play out our match because it was very back and forth. He was controlling my auras with things like the hammer, lead the charges, blinks, time skippers, and I was protecting my spectral shields because he wasn't dominating very much. And we were able to have a very back and forth game until I was able to chip him down with spectral shields and get the win. After that, I only had a couple more matches left for the day, and I was determined to stick it out for as long as possible and to try and make top 32 or top 64, since top 8 was basically out of my grasp with 4 losses. Beyond that, I went in and had to face another Chain who I beat. He was not expecting the aggro plan, and so he only was running 3 Phantasm Breakers in his entire deck list, with Command and Conquer being the only one. So I was able to very easily push through tons of damage and get him down very low and win the game. Beyond that, I played against another Starvo. I ended up playing against 8 Starvos at the event overall. So there was 2 Casinos and a Control on day 2. There was a Chain. There was a Prism. And how many does that put me at? Right, so that's 3 Starvo, 5, and so there's only 2 more matchups that I'm forgetting here. And only faced 2 Chains and 2 Prisms. So basically, yeah, I mean, well, I guess it would have been 5 Starvos day 2, right? Because, yeah, I only faced 3 day 1. So yeah, I faced 5 Starvos in day 2. Wow, that's crazy to think about. It was pretty demoralizing, right? Like, I had to face against 7 Casino Starvos when I took all the cards out of my deck that were super good into that matchup, and then I got faced against it way more than the field was represented, so that kind of hurt. But I was able to win against one of the Casino Starvos, luckily, kind of keep myself in the running for, getting some wins in there. It was a very toughly fought game. He didn't fuse a whole lot, and eventually, because of Vestige, I actually was able to win that game. I was running Vestige in this list, and basically, I had got a Genesis and a Haze Bending out kind of in the late game, and I had been pitch stacking my yellows pretty consistently to be able to keep playing out my turns, and I had a good amount of soul banked up as well. And every turn, he was trying to pressure my face because he didn't really have the fuse and everything, and he needed to try and get cards out of my hand. But the Genesis would come on, I would get to put a Herald into my soul, draw a yellow card, pitch the yellow card, have one resource floating, and the Bastion of Eisenloft shield that creates a frostbite when it blocks was useless for the rest of the game because I always had the extra resource to get my chip damage in with all my shields. So I was able to make a comeback and win that match, although it was very, very hardly fought. And yeah, so after facing a whole bunch of Starvos and losing to 3 Starvos on day 2, beating 2 Starvos, I had played against the Chain. My last matchup was a Prism, and I was able to win that one pretty quickly and handily as well, just thanks to the aggro package. Really coming in hot with all these reds and the insane fractal value really helped me take advantage of people who were trying to play a slower, more setup heavy game plan. And at the end of the day, we ended up in 97th place at the Pro Tour. We didn't make top 64, we didn't make top 32, we didn't make top 8, that's for sure. But the deck did exactly what it was supposed to do. I beat every single character that wasn't Starvo on Casino, and I'm pretty happy with that. Casino Starvo's on its way out for a reason. It's an insanely powerful deck. It's got all the tools you could ever hope to have, and sometimes it just wins games, and there's really nothing you can do about it in a lot of cases. In fact, there were a lot of cases throughout the tournament where I was thinking, man, what if I had Parable? What if I had Ode? What if I had Prismatic Shield? And every single time I thought about it and I looked at my hands, the games didn't really last that long. I was thinking, well, it wouldn't have really changed anything. A lot of the time, it would have been the exact same result. Maybe I would have felt a little better about it, but it ended up being just not in the cards for me in that way, which is fine. I had a lot of fun at the event. I had a lot of really fun games. And it was just fun to be there and be part of the energy and the environment, getting to see everybody perform at the top tables, being able to kind of get my matches done really quickly so I had time to eat and, just kind of relax in between rounds was really nice as well, not playing like a super grindy deck. And yeah, so I can now go into the deck tech. Let's talk a bit about some of the card choices here. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the equipment. Obviously, we've got Luminaris, we've got Arcanite Skullcap, Ironhide, Phantasmal Footsteps, and Vestige of Soul, and Null Rune Gloves. These are really important because I was mainly worried about the Dominate from Starvo with the Ironhide Gauntlet and the Skullcap, as well as air additions from Prism. So being able to use your extra resources, say of pitching a blue card to pay for Soul Shield, you can block for 8 with Ironhide Gauntlet, which is the same as a red immovable from Arsenal, which means you only need 1 Herald from hand to fully cover a Oakenold when it's got the triple fuse from Starvo. So Ironhide Gauntlet's incredibly powerful for that reason. Skullcap is also very good because similarly it's a 2-block that you can do without committing anything from hand, so it can help you just cover up those dominates a bit easier and give you a bit of that extra HP into Chain. Notably, I'm running Vestige of Soul, which for those who are unfamiliar means that when a card goes into my soul, for the rest of my turn, light cards pitch for 1 additional resource. This is extremely relevant because Vestige of Soul allows you to make breakpoints, such as the 4-cost light auras like Merciful and Genesis, be able to be played with a single light blue card, but also it really helps you with your math of being able to make a Spectral Shield every single turn that you hit a Herald, and still be able to swing with your whole hand. That a little bit of extra resource gain is really important for that, and you'll notice that there's no Halo of Illumination. Now, normally Halo of Illumination is a common equipment that lets you pay a resource to put a card from your hand into your soul. If the card you put into your soul was the light card, you get to draw a card. So very similar to Ebb and Fold. The problem with Halo that I found was I needed room in the deck, and in every single matchup that was popular, I always felt that Skullcap was going to get more value. Into Chain, Skullcap is basically just 3 free HP, which really does matter in the late game. You also have access to things like the Arcane Barrier, which is pretty relevant against Rosetta Thorn in grind game scenarios. being able to stop Starvo in those short games from just running you over is really important, although it didn't really end up working out in that way. But there are very few times where the Halo would have felt useful, and while Halo is a great card and super has a lot of synergy with Vestige of Soul, I do think that Skullcap served its function fine here. And if Starvo's not in the meta, you can probably go back to Halo, but with Starvo there, I decided that Skullcap was the move. Beyond that, talking about the main board. The main board was basically running all of these cards here, and I'll tell you why. So 52 cards in the main board minus equipments is going to put us at around 48 cards. The reason for this is that we're going to be running our Mirage Metamorphs. It's one of the best attacks that Prism has. Arclight Sentinel, Genesis, Merciful Retribution, Soul Shield, Tome of Divinity, Enigma Chimera Yellow, as well as Herald of Erudition, Judgment, and then blues and yellows of Protection, Triumph, and War Tunes, with blue pommels thrown in for good measure. Why is this the main board? Well, the main board, the whole logic behind it was, I don't really care about popping Phantasms into Aura Prisms. A lot of the time, if you're playing against Aura Prism anyway, they're going to have Parable and they're going to have Passy Mirage. So a lot of the times, your Phantasm breaking cards, such as Command and Conquer or Raging Onslaught, are not actually going to be able to pop Phantasm reliably. And so I was worried less about blocking and more about turning on the maximum gas into Prism. Because of that, I was able to cut Raging Onslaughts, Command and Conquers, and Celestial Cataclysms in order to make room for cards like Enigma Chimera and Fractal. Enigma Chimera Red and Yellow specifically are really, really powerful cards because they stay on the chain so that Fractal can still get value, and the yellow pitch is extremely valuable on a raw stat stick. Enigma Chimera Yellow pays for itself and gives you the go again from Luminaris, so a lot of the times if you throw a yellow Chimera and follow it up with a Fractal, that's 14 damage for 3 cards. That's as strong as a red Wartune Herald into a red Wartune Herald, and everyone knows how much damage that is. So Enigma Chimera for me felt like a really great, overly performing card compared to a Celestial Cataclysm, because there are just so many hands that I would get where it'd be Celestial Cataclysm and some other BS that I didn't really want to have, where I would say, wow, I really just wish I had a 7 attack to throw at my opponent instead of having to block because I'm not going to be able to cast the Cataclysm, or it's going to force me into a bad line of play. So that's where the yellow Chimeras came from. They replaced the Phantasm Breakers. Genesis, Merciful, and Tome of Divinity were kind of the payoffs for the Vestige. If you got a Merciful down, if they popped it, you could then Tome of Divinity by pitching a light blue card, which we weren't running a ton of, but a lot of the times you were not really worrying about lining that up, because honestly, a lot of the time you weren't even playing the Merciful Retributions for Genesis, especially if you're racing. A lot of the time you're using them for pitch, and so I wasn't super worried about using them for the Tome of Divinity, although it did come up sometimes where the Genesis would stick for a turn and you get to actually use the card. Whereas Merciful was more of like a, hey, I've got a Genesis and a Merciful in hand on maybe turn 1. Okay, I'll play the Merciful, drop the Genesis into Arsenal, maybe I'll be able to get it into play very efficiently. Right? Or similarly with like a Tome and a Merciful, you could play the Merciful, have the Tome in Arsenal, maybe get some resources back in that way. Judgment was there for Chain. Protection was also there for Chain and also Prism. It's just a really high value Herald. The Spectral Shield is really valuable. And Triumph was mainly there for Starvo, because a lot of the time Starvos with their new yellow cards, like because of the banning of Autumn's Touch, they had to fill out the Earth cards with more yellow cards, such as Break Ground and the Evergreen. So by having those V6 attack cards, they now had even more cards in their deck that did not pop Phantasm. If it's a Triumph, right? So Triumph reduces the attack of the card by 1. They're 6s, they go down to 5, they no longer break Phantasm. Whereas if they were red Autumn's Touches, they would have, right? So they had a much easier time pressing damage through with Herald of Triumph, while also helping against the Prism Mirror, where if they had, the Command and Conquers or the Raging Onslaughts, the Triumphs would still get through and turn on the Soul, so it was very important for that. And also I was just scared of like random brutes just kind of beating me up, so I wanted to have a bit of insurance into that, while having enough Light Illusionist cards to synergize with Genesis and have things go into Soul. Notably, I replaced Herald of Rebirth for Triumphs, because Rebirth just didn't do a lot. It just did not put in a lot of work, and because the game just didn't go slow enough. You know, hitting the Herald Rebirth to get an erudition back is all well and good, but most of the times it's not even going to matter. So I'd rather have the attack go through and hedge for these other matchups in that way. Wartune Herald is obviously one of the best cards that Prism has because it's a 1-cost Phantasm, so it gets go again, and even if they break it, you can get your action point back by paying with the 1 floating, while keeping your go again, so you can attack wide with all of your permanents, such as your auras. Soul Shield is fantastic as well because it fills your soul, helps you turn on your go agains, it kind of does it all, so it's a great core card for Prism. Beyond that, I had the Arclight Sentinels, which were really important for things like cementing your board state and just having a good aura to play. But the real spicy card here is the Blue Pummel. Pummel has always been a good card in Prism. Her Heralds tend to be 2-cost cards, so she can easily pummel them. But the thing is that Pummel is an expensive play, right? You have to dedicate your entire turn into pummeling something because it's a 4-card play, and that's really difficult. Like, that's really, really difficult sometimes. So, especially when your attacks are Phantasms. So, if they pop the first attack and you had a yellow pummel, let's say, or red pummel, you're not attacking again that turn, right? You don't have enough resources to pay for everything while keeping your go again. So I ended up going for blue pummel because blue pummel allows you to, if your Phantasm is broken, to pay the extra resource by pitching the blue pummel, float 2 resources, and then still swing with your second Herald. It's very, very important to be able to do that because it gives you that flexibility, especially because Herald of Erudition has Dominate. So a lot of the times your opponent is going to be blocking for exactly 5 off of something like a Grasp of the Arc or the Grasp of the Arknight, right? Or plus a 3-block card, or they'll be blocking with Crown, Shield, and maybe a Crater Fist with another card, right? And so maybe they're blocking 6, preventing 1. Or 5 blocking and preventing 1, you know what I mean? And so Pummel Blue is just enough. It's just enough damage to make that Erudition a 7 to get over that type of block. It's just enough to get over Husk if all they do is throw a Husk at your Erudition. And it can just really allow you to stick that damage, get the discard. It's less, it's relevant, but it's not the most relevant thing, but it just helps you play around those defensive cards. While also giving you that ability to keep playing through their blocks. I used to use Lunging Press for that, but what I found was there were too many situations where, you know, you're playing against a Prism who can make a Spectral Shield in response to Lunging Press. You can, like, Chain can Art of War, or Chain will just use Husk, and then you just, you know, the Erudition just doesn't get over. So Herald of Judgment also synergizes with the Pummel here because a big win con into Chain is landing in Herald of Judgment when they're starting to get to 5 or 6 shackles, and they can't clear out their blood debt. They take like 5 damage. They can't clear out their blood debt again when they banish more cards. They take another 5 or 6 damage, whatever it is, and you can really start winning the game through that type of pivotal play, especially when you're on the front foot for the entire game. A big thing about beating Chain with this list is that you want to pressure and rip their armor away from them as soon as possible. That's ripping Husk to start the bleed. That's ripping Grasp to force the Eruditions through. Really forcing them to block, and then pushing damage through once you've gotten that away. So Erudition and Judgment really helped with that, especially because these are must blocks for Chain a lot of the time. So having Fractal Replication as well allowed you to do Erudition Fractal, which would normally pull Grasp and Husk, or Skullcat plus Creepers. So it's very threatening and will normally pull cards out of their hand as well as their armor pieces and really jam up their ability to go off on you. Beyond that, I ran a Aura package in the side. So that's like the main deck over there. The Aura package was Haze Bending, Passing Mirage, Shimmers of Silver with Unmovables. The main reason for this was that the Passing Mirage and Haze Bending and Shimmers were the best value into Starvo most of the time. Pierce Reality doesn't do a whole lot because they can just pop your Phantasm and it's not really worth the action point a lot of the time compared to just having Blue Pummel. A lot of the times, I would rather have the blue pummels that if they don't block a Herald, I can at least force the damage through. Or if they don't pop the Herald, I can force the damage through and force their blocks to be a bit worse. Compared to dropping the Pierce at the end of my turn and not really being able to do anything with it. Haze Bending obviously gives you the shields over time, which is great value when you pair it with things like Genesis, Merciful, and Shimmers. Passing Mirage is a decent thing to try and get some tempo back by throwing your Heralds. And Unmovable was there for Starvo, and I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted yellow Unmovables or reds. So I split the difference, and I had 2 reds and 2 yellows. In retrospect, I think that yellow unmovables are just better. I don't really think the reds are necessary for Prism because you have access to spectral shields. You have access to these little ways to chip, damage through or to prevent that one extra hit. Or if you're blocking already, there's no point blocking that much more. So a lot of the time, I found that the red unmovables were more of a hindrance than anything, especially because of the pitch. But 2 reds was fine. I think that yellows are just better going forward. That's my only real learning moment there. I did run the Glisten for anybody who had watched the prelude video to the whole event. Glisten was going to make its way into my deck list no matter what, and I found a way to fit it in, so I was very happy about that. Never ended up getting to run it, but that's kind of just the fun of the card. As far as the aggro sideboard, we had red Chimera, Fractal, red Protection, red Wartune. The reason for this is that you need to be able to pressure as much damage as possible to be able to raise Chain as well as pressuring Prism, because if you let Prism stall out, then you really give the Prism all the time in the world to set up their Parables and their Haze Bendings and their Genesis and their Mercifuls, and then you're just going to get overwhelmed by value, because once they start blocking you, once they start popping your Phantasms, it's really hard to get Soul into the kill their auras efficiently. But with cards like Wartune and Herald of Protection, you can very efficiently fill your soul and get more tokens to manage their auras while racing them down. And a big thing about Herald of Protection, especially red, is that you're coming in for 7. If they don't exactly block with a Soul Shield and Footsteps off of a blue, they're going to have to pay 3 cards to stop you from hitting that. They're going to have to pay either their resources for a Spectral Shield, they're going to have to pay for Footsteps and 2-3 blocks. A lot of the times that's what's going to happen. So if they're spending 3 cards to block you, they're not going to be able to play a yellow aura. And the yellow auras are the most threatening ones, normally. And so if you are getting blocked like that, and then you also throw a Herald at the end of your turn at their face, they can't stop most of the damage, they take the damage, they can't develop their board state anymore, and you're really able to pressure them with those protections. Yellow and blues as well. Protection's basically a must block into Prism, and when you throw Fractals into the mix to get it through anyway, while getting buffed by whatever they blocked with, it's a really very powerful sequence. And I can talk a little bit about my Prism matchups now. So my first Prism matchup was on day 1, and I got a red Chimera into Arsenal very quickly, and my opponent in the first couple turns, I'm talking turns 1 or 2, got a Prismatic Shield Haze Bending playoff with an Arsenal. Now, that was interesting because I was going to have a hard time getting through those shields. But my hand was red Wartune, a yellow card, a Fractal, and I think it was maybe a blue Pummel. But the point was that I was able to attack with red Wartune, thinking, okay, I'll throw my Chimera next, and maybe I had red Protection, maybe. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to throw this other card at the end too. But what ended up happening was I attack with red Wartune. He blocks with 2 Eruditions. Now, what's relevant about that is that Fractal Replication copies every attack that's an Illusions attack on the chain separately and gains their effects. So it sees 2 Eruditions and is going to give you 2 Eruditions of effects. So I attack with red Wartune. He blocks with 2 Eruditions. Chain is still open. He also blocks with Footsteps, so he's floating 2 resources. I come in with Fractal, fearing that if he had a 7 attacker or like a Phantasm Breaker, that he was trying to bait me, and that if I had thrown my Chimera to guarantee the 8 damage Fractal, that I would have lost basically all my damage on the turn. So I just went with the Fractal, said, okay, if you have it, you have it, but I'm going to try and get through here. Come in, getting the attack from the Wartune Herald is 7. So 7 dominate, draw 2 on hit, draw 2 on hit, because it's copying each Fractal Erudition. So Fractal came in for 7 dominate, draw 4, go again, for 0, which is pretty good. He could not block it, because he did not have enough block in hand after he blocked with 3 cards. And yeah, so we drew. So he called the judge, actually, being like, hey, is this how this works? And the judge is like, yep, that's how it works. So I draw 4, goes my soul, Vestige is on. I play red Protection, I play red Chimera, and then I, blew my opponent out so hard and killed his entire board, got rid of all his shields, all of his cards in his hand, pushed like 25, 30 damage, and he just conceded on the spot. Like, to be fair, maybe there's some world where he comes back in that, but, I basically blew him out with the double erudition block. So let it be a lesson to you. If you are playing in the Prism Mirror, don't block with erudition ever. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. If your opponent plays Fractal, you are absolutely going to die. So do not do that. That game took like 5 minutes. Then later on, the other Prism matchup was kind of similar. Just a lot of gas, run the Prism down in the ground, get some shields down, manage their auras, and then just outvalue them. Because even if they pop 1 or 2 Phantasms, you're still doing way more damage than they are, and you're preventing their snowballs. So that was a very good strategy into a field of people running only 3 to 6 Phantasm Breakers. If people are running 12, maybe this doesn't work so well, but I think this worked pretty well, considering the fact that, I don't think people were really ready for it. Yeah, so Wartune, Fractal, Protection, and Chimera were fantastic. Chimera was so good, especially into Chain. Like, the ability to pitch a yellow, swing with Chimera, and swing with a Fractal at the end for 16 damage for 3 cards is incredible. And yeah, you could run Phantasmaclasm instead, but I just found that it was a high variance card. Most of the time, you're fixing their hands, it felt like, because if Phantasmaclasm was an optional effect, like you didn't have to give them the redraw, I would definitely consider running that instead of Chimera. But the problem is that it is mandatory and they get to redraw, so I can't tell you how many times I attacked Alexi and they got to redraw Lightning Press and pop my whole turn, and I had Fractal that couldn't do anything, right? Or I let them redraw into a Runic Reclamation, or whatever it is. So I decided to go with Chimera because Chimera more easily fits the cost curve of you pitch a yellow, you swing, you Fractal, you're happy. You don't have to have a Tunic resource, you don't have to have extra cards. It's a simple, efficient play, and it's still 8 damage. It's 1 less damage for 1 less resource. That's a great trade. And my mentality and my logic generally was that if I'm coming in with Chimera for 8 and my opponent can pop it, they will. If they can't pop it, Fractal Replication has a clear path at my opponent's face. It basically gets the way paved for it. Whereas if I attack with Phantasmaclasm, and let's say they don't pop it, and then I play Fractal Replication is also going to give them a redraw. So they might be able to pop it, and I would rather do a 8 damage play. If it doesn't work, Arsenal the Fractal and save the Fractal for a turn where it's going to work, compared to throwing a 9, maybe it hits, and then throwing another 9 and maybe it hits for a lot more resource investment. That was kind of my mentality there. But yeah, so Chimera was fantastic. Red Chimera was great all day. Not going off of the combat chain, rather on hit, was fantastic. And that was basically the list. It was also very nice for sideboarding purposes. A lot of the time, all I had to do was just say, okay, I'm playing into an aggressive matchup, side in all the red cards. I'm playing into a defensive matchup, side in all the auras and D-reacts. And I did cut 1 Chimera in the Starvo matchup so I could make room for the unmovables. So yeah, the event was really fun overall. Made top 100. Happy about that. The deck performed really well. I still think this deck is a lot of fun. I still think this deck is very good, especially into a field that's not really ready for a lot of Phantasms, like a very aura-teched metagame. But if people are expecting a list like this and they're playing more Phantasm-heavy breaking things, you're going to really struggle. Like, this deck would probably struggle immensely into Rhinar. Although Levy it did just fine into, so I wouldn't really worry about that too much. But yeah, I really enjoy the list. I hope you guys, I'll put the link in the description, so I hope you guys can enjoy it and see if it's fun for you. It's a good list. It does the job that it's trying to do. It does not do well in the Casino Starvo, though, so you might want to avoid taking this to a Pro Quest if you know that Starvo is going to be heavily represented there, since he's still not Living Legended. But once he gets out of the meta, I think lists that are able to pivot between mid-range, like aggro and hybrid and whatever with the auras, is going to be really valid for Prism. And I think that Vestige of Soul definitely has a place, mainly because, yeah, you're not really looking for the maximum pop-off on the Tome of Divinity Halo turns with this list, but what you can do is, if I throw a Wartune or a Herald at my opponent, I have any floating, or I have the ability to pitch a light blue card, I get to use Vestige to pitch to make a free shield, basically. It's like make a free shield every turn, which is like heal 1, deal 1. That's pretty strong, and not to ramble, but If you're in a matchup where you know they're not going to block, Vestige gives you a lot of upfront value and helps you race, whereas Tunic in those games would have given you maybe 1 or 2 resources, whereas Vestige lets you heal up to 3 damage and deal 3 extra damage in the same amount of time. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're in a more race-heavy meta game. But yeah, that's the list. That was basically everything that we did. And yeah, be on the lookout for that. So one quick thing that I wanted to do is to show my kind of what we got to find from the Pro Tour. We got these really cool Heart of Findall mats, and they were really fantastic, as well as the Flesh and Blood water bottle. For those who haven't seen it, one moment. There we go. Look at that. We got the Flesh and Blood water bottle. That's James White. Got to sign it there. And it says, action, drink water, gain hydration, go again. So it's pretty cool. You know, a nice little gift for the people at the Pro Tour that we weren't expecting. We weren't expecting this mat, and it's now my favorite mat ever, and I'm going to be using it all the time. Hopefully, can start getting into some gameplay videos here soon. But beyond that, we need to talk about the winners of the 1,000 sub giveaway. So let's get right into that. So I went online, found a random comment selector raffle program from the internet, and I rolled it 3 times, and let's see who won. Drum roll. All right. Anyway, so the first winner was Viewtifulkye. Thank you very much for your comment. Viewtifulkye said, easily some of the best content centered on Prism on YouTube. The link to Prism Gauntlet isn't working. It is now. So as a quick reminder, the Prism Gauntlet is the Prism only tournament that I'll be hosting in about 3 weeks. At that time, we'll be having a online tournament that's open to people who are patrons of the channel. I'll link you to the thing down in the description below as well. And the winner will get to win a full playset of Herald of Rebirth promos, and the runner-ups will get 1 of each color as well. So look forward to that, and if you want to try and be the best Prism out there and win some cool prizes, definitely come in and check that out. But so that link is now working. But yeah, thank you, Viewtifulkye, for your comment. You've won 1 of each color of the Herald of Rebirths, so we'll find a way to get that to you soon. Preferably, I can DM you through YouTube, and this goes for all the winners. But if that's not available, then please DM me on Discord, and I will find a way to get you your prizes. All right, the second winner was Flar, who said, Tunic is still better than Vestige, change my mind. I definitely agree that Tunic has its merits. I made a whole video, which I can link here, maybe. Does that work? We'll find out. About how Vestige and Tunic each have their own valid reasons of running them, and their own, they have their own merits. But I still went with Vestige at the Pro Tour because I knew that my opponents weren't going to be blocking very much, and I wanted to try and punish them for that. And it ended up doing pretty well. Definitely, Tunic has the upsides in those slow matchups where you don't really get to get a lot of headway, such as Starvo and the like. And maybe there's room with, instead of a Glisten, you can run Tunic and then have an actual better game plan into a slower Fatigue. Maybe that's like a good move there. So true, Flar, Tunic definitely got further in the tournament than Vestige did, so maybe there's something there to that, but we'll see over time. Definitely think both have their merits, but we'll also, message me and we'll find a way to get you your promos if I can't get a hold of you first. And then we've got Allan Bond. Congratulations to you. You also are going to be winning 1 of each of the Herald of Rebirth promos. With a comment saying, would love to win some awesome promos, love your content. Well, lucky for you, the random number generator picked you, and so you will get to be a winner here. Thank you so much for your support and for liking the content. I will also try and get in touch with you, et cetera, et cetera. So to everyone else, thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for commenting and liking on the past video. Reaching 1,000 subs has been a tremendous honor and pleasure for me, and I look forward to bringing you guys more fantastic Flesh and Blood content in the months and such to come. Thank you for watching. Keep it cool and take care. Peace. Thank you so much for watching. This video and videos like it are made possible thanks to viewers like you.
I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons that helped support the channel, starting with the Dreamweaver tier patrons. Tara Blitz, you rock, you always do. Thank you so much for your continued support. Moving on to the Sentinel tier patrons. This is the tier for people who do one-on-one coaching sessions with me, learning about Flesh and Blood, sideboarding, deck techs, and everything in between. Thank you so much to Bon, Exploding Potatoes, Frederick Lundevic, Jacob, James Swain, Joe Gianoli, Commodore, Mauricio Valesquez Castillo, Michael Lynch, Patrick Weiss, Ronnie Martin, and Tim J. Thank you all so much for your support. It is a pleasure working with you, and you make everything I do on this platform possible. Moving on, we've got the Herald tier patrons. Thank you to Alex Enslow, Andrew Wilkins, Andy Lee, Better Than Average, Brandon, Christopher D. Bates, Douglas DeJong, Ike Hagen, Greg Mitchell, Henrik, Jake Arms, Jason Rost, John and Downey Jr., Cantriacker, Moonshaker, Muskrat Tuck, Nicholas Astner, Nicholas Kiriako, Oxalati, Pinguino Oscuro, Raymond Scott, Ryan Cochran, Starman Jones, Tim Chambers, Ty Craig, Valentine N. As a special reminder, remember that these tier patrons and up, the $5 tier Herald patrons and up, will get free entry into the Prism Gauntlet Tournament, where you can compete for fabulous prizes such as playmats and Herald of Rebirth promos. And finally, we've got the Spectral Shield tier patrons. Thank you so much to Andrew Good, Bryce Morgan, Drew Wagers, Rachel, and Sarazar.